Hey, Scott, so good to see you. Nice that you take time to do this little interview. And yeah, in these special times we're in now, Scott, you are normally a traveling guy, traveling all the time. You have to be like mad right now, staying at home all the time. How are you, Scott?
Thank you, Tim, for your compassion and your pastoral heart to my current need.
Of course.
Certainly, I am missing planes, and I didn't know that I would. I used to, you have a system when you travel and you follow the system, and then you think after a week of it, you think every day going to a different city, you think, oh, I can't wait to not do this. I'll never do that again. I'll never say that again. I can't wait to get back to it. And it's not about the plane so much as what you're doing with your life and where you're going and who you're meeting and hanging out with them. We're due to meet soon, so I hope I can get there.
Great. Hey, I did a couple of interviews with German leaders already in this format. But today, with you, I have somebody with a European perspective, I would say, and think. So the pandemic is everywhere. Do you see that churches across Europe do handle it different, struggle different, or is it everywhere the same? What would you say?
Well, that's a great question because I can only come from the people I currently work with in Europe, and there's a smaller group of those churches. So I haven't got the picture of, every level of church life across Europe, but I'll deal with the ones I do work with. Significant number in Germany, some in Norway, Sweden, UK, and so on. First of all, one of the interesting things of this is if you polarize church out from the idea of the event-driven church, which is the attractive model, pretty much what we're about, really, the attractional model, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's I could go into that. I won't go into the detail. There's nothing wrong with being attractional. To almost the home church system, which is very missional, they say, reaching the homes and so forth. Interesting in this pandemic, neither of those two are functioning. I have a feeling when it first happened, the home church group were like, oh, this is our time, look what's happened, but we couldn't even meet in homes. We have a third way called the online church movement. And who would have ever imagined that would be the case in this moment? But that's exactly what's happened the third way. What I've seen, amazingly so, is that the churches have stepped up very quickly into that gap. None of them muck around. They go straight into it, and they've done really well. Some of the services are very high quality. Some are they're just a service, and they're good, for the technical abilities they have. Interestingly, in the UK, they celebrate very much over there, and probably in Germany too, the people who are caring for the sick, the nurses, the doctors, and they're applauding these people. And I guess now we have flipped the coin over in church in Europe to applauding the techies, because they make everything work. So thank God for the techies who actually do know how this works. So the coin's flipped there, hasn't it, a bit? Yeah. But I'm seeing that they stepped into the online really quickly. Some churches actually engaged in it at a very high level and invested money in getting resource from people and finding out how to do it better and really going into it deeply. Others just provide a service to their church. I am seeing, as there's a significant number of people viewing church. We don't yet know what that means in terms of coming back and whether they come to us physically, but certainly that number's gone up. In fact, the Guardian newspaper, which is not typically reporting this way in the UK, has an excellent article on research they did where they believe 25% of the UK has started clicking in online regularly. They've even got age groups. They've done research on this, where the age groups are and who's looking in. And some of the stats are quite phenomenal. It's quite an interesting article. So definitely what we're seeing is a huge buy-in from people wanting to know more about church, God. However, let me say this, as with any of these times, other spiritual forms of seeking is going on. Psychic contact with psychics is right through the roof, for example. So there's good and bad with these times, isn't there? Thankfully for us, I think the church is doing an outstanding job European-wide of stepping into a gap that if they didn't, we might have seen it absorbed by some flaky things going on. So thankfully for that matter, we've done a great job.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, would you say this is the same with all kinds of churches and all kinds of leaders, or is there differences? Like, let's say differences between types of leaders or types of leadership approaches, but also would you see a difference between churches who would, you could say, have a strong brand or a high profile in their country compared to others like a normal, healthy local church trying to deal with the whole situation? Are there differences, or is it like everybody is in a good place?
Yeah, good question, because when you have the branded church, they have a bubble of their own, you might say. That word now means a different thing, but they have their own perspective. And so very much I find the more branded or larger churches with motorsites are dealing mainly with the people that they've got in their world, and they have to keep that together, which I understand. They are reaching out, but for example, research shows that a worship service online right now, the click out rate after 8 minutes, as I think I wrote an article on this where somebody in Britain said a person who'd never been to online church looked in on one, lots of worship, and he said to the researcher later, if I want to watch Britain's Got Talent, I'll watch it on the YouTube, meaning he thought it was like a talent show. So they don't get that part of us. Whereas the branded churches tend to have this thing they have to do for their church. And I get that they're servicing that thing, where there's others more independent, say new churches that started up, they're being a little more innovative, and they don't have to worry about those things so much. So they're doing innovative ideas and thoughts to gather more people in. So there definitely is different pitches on how people are handling this. One of the discussions I had from somebody was, do we go full online reaching the lost, or do we go full online, servicing our church? And the answer to that is there's got to be a middle ground. It's neither one nor the other. It's more how you hook the online viewer who's a first-time visitor than it is about whether you change the content entirely to some sort of seeker-sensitive thing that nobody wants to watch really at the end of the day. So it's how you're hooking them as you go along by giving them options through the day. It depends on your techies again. I know churches that are doing very, very, who are doing very, very, I would call them quite basic, almost with an iPhone, doing live service. I've got a couple of churches like that. They've decided to dumb it down. But their viewing rates, based on their normal attendance, is equal to anybody else's in terms of, like, they haven't got less watching, they've got the same amount. So people are tending to click into people they know and who they follow, who have been recommended to do so, not really knowing that there could be something different.
Yeah.
Which is a bit like when somebody comes to your church for the first time, Tim, and goes, I didn't know there were churches like this around, which is the same experience online a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Wow. Well, I think now we're a couple of weeks into the whole situation, and there's probably a huge learning curve on many things. And I thought, well, you also mentioned already some different approaches to it. Another part of that is some churches just said, okay, we do a digital Sunday thing, and others said we have something every day, like a game show that night, and a prayer meeting there, and this and different effects on the whole shift to digital we see. What would you say? Is there anything we can now say which works or which doesn't work, or which is like very important, and other things, were nice to try but already have shown as not so much effective?
That's a great question, and you're right. Everyone's doing different things. I know a pastor that does a half-hour Bible teaching every day, 7 days a week. Plus he does his services, plus he does midweek stuff, and it's a lot. And I'm going to flip the coin on that one and say this. The thing that we have to really concentrate now is the comeback rather than what we're in. We know what we're in now, and we're dealing with it. And they're talking about this new normal. I sort of think I use the word old radical. I think what we have to look at as a church is going back, not to new normal. There are some things that are new normal, but really we're going to look at old radical. What was, for example, I'll give you an example as we discussed before. Some churches are trying to make change. And one of the questions, and they're using this moment to make change on staffing and things like this. And I asked them this question: was this a discussion you had 6 months ago with somebody else that you're now implementing, or is it just something you decided to do? And my thought is, if they were thinking of it 6 months ago, and now going to implement. That's a fair point, because they were already in the motions of doing it. It just means they have to restructure slightly how they do it in this moment. But if they're making up all these things in this moment, they could find themselves in a little trouble, because I think people are finding this is very unstable right now in terms of what their job means and their lifestyle and their mindset. And they need to come back to something that is old radical. Old radical means Sunday services, teamwork, the radical things we used to do that people can start to think, oh, it's going to change now. I won't have to do those things anymore. We need to go back to old radical. So now I've gone off the track and I've sort of forgotten the question, but I hope you're getting my point, that actually the flipping of the coin for me is, does the team and the church have the energy to come back? Because if you're in a church where you're doing so much work and then it's time to come back, either big bang or slowly, and everyone goes, oh, we're so tired, we need a holiday. Well, you can't have one because you can't go anywhere anyway. But, you're so much energy's been spent on doing online that you can't come back properly. That's the question I'd be asking of that, more than is it the right thing for me to do lots or less, is if I do this, will I have a strong team ready to come back to old radical? Or will I have a team that goes, we're too tired. We've spent so much time, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is, building this thing. And now you want us to do that? Because the energy level coming back is going to be twice what it is now. Because it's physical. Take, for example, a Zoom meeting. You do a Zoom meeting now with your team. Fantastic. It used to be Skype. What's Skype? Nobody uses that word anymore. That's a 1990s word, isn't it? So it's Zoom meetings now. They do Zoom meetings. And here's the thing. A Zoom meeting you can do an hour. You can do amazing content. Actually, content levels go up because they're just screaming, just looking at the screen. But that meeting normally midweek in a church is a 4.5 hour event for anybody else. They have to pick up the kids, drive to the meeting, have something to eat, have a coffee. Then you do the hour of content, and then they have another coffee, and it's all nice, but it's a different experience. Now, that's what we're going to come back to. Now, we'll mix it up a bit and still use Zoom, but we want people to be present, don't we? We want them to be together, because that's the old radical. Okay, we could say in the book of Acts, they didn't have the equipment to do those things, but the key was eating together, being together, in face with each other. And if we don't get that back, sooner or later, something is missing about who we are. So here's my answer to that question. It's not whether it's right or wrong. It's whether the team and the leader has the energy that's needed when the comeback comes. Because if everyone's so tired and you can't do your comeback right, then you've missed the point. That's my view.
Wow, very good. Brings me to that other question I wanted to ask. I think many leaders are in an extra high pace right now, or the last couple of weeks, because now the 24/7 availability over all those digital channels is even more than ever, and it's a completely new normal. All the habits we had are gone, and we have to find new structures for the day and how we tackle everything. Do you have any recommendations, for leaders in that situation, how they could find a good, balanced way to deal with that? Even maybe thinking, may I have to have a summer vacation this year? Does my government allow me to do so? And all of that, what would be a healthy way to, to end up there, what you described, to start the normal again with energy and not drained out completely?
Yeah. That's a good question, and it is one that I just got to charge that one. That's a good question, and it is one that I've been looking at a lot too, because the same rules actually really apply to what it was like in our previous life. The same rules apply, and it's about margin. And margin, if you don't create that margin, I'm finding the same as what you're talking about now. I'm not leading a church, as you know, but churches are onto my back to do things, and they want stuff at 8 o'clock at night, one church 6 in the morning. And it's like, heck, I'd rather just catch my flight at 6 in the morning and turn up. I know the routines, and you work the routines. And I think that margin of making sure you're not cramming so that life just becomes this ongoing, almost 24/7 type thing, which we never did before. We tended to create margin. If you lose that right now and you just give your time over to this, now not everybody's doing that. Many people are actually finding lots of margin, time for kids and extra time and stuff like this, and a whole new lease of life is coming for them. So not everyone's like that. There are a few though who are really pushing the envelope, and I wonder if they will have the energy to get back. They have very little margin. The worst is they've got maybe children as well who they have to play this game around, so they put things later at night and all the rest of it. So I think what I'd say there, if you're not making margin and looking at your calendar, the tricky part of this is we used to really work our calendars. I find a lot of guys, they work their calendar, but it's more about where they can fit another Zoom in or another meeting, or somebody wants them for a while, than it is to manage their actual existence, which is what a calendar is about. It's managing your life. Now, if you put together with the idea of energy and coming back strong, plus the idea of sustaining this for a long time, you're going to use your calendar well, not to manage meetings, but to manage your world so you can enjoy what's happening and be ready for the next phase. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I think you always have to ask yourself, is this what takes such and such time of my life really making a difference or not?
Very
and
true.
I think if everything changes, we tend to do a lot of things just because they seem to be necessary. While we have to constantly ask ourselves, is this really making the difference? Or am I just doing that in reaction of the current circumstances?
So true.
Yeah. So, wow.
And there are some of us, Tim, in this world that it doesn't matter what situation we're in, we're workaholics and we want to keep working for the kingdom of God, which is a great thing. But we've got to be doing this life, as I've said before, for 70 years, not for the next 3 months. It's a 70-year journey. This is a big bump in the road and we've got to handle it. But some guys are actually just driven. And so they're going to consume every space they can with whatever and find it exciting. And that's good. But after all these years of doing this thing, I was that person too, ask my family and wife how I would fill a space. You know this a little bit too, the way I work. So I think I'd say you need to manage this differently right now and use this in a different way, and don't just jump in with everything you've got, because you've got to come out the other end with everything you've got. And that's more important. When we get back to the old radical, that's the consistent model, not this one.
Yeah. So in Germany, it's a discussion right now about the headline would be church services are allowed again.
I read that myself.
Look at the terms and conditions of that, you see, well, okay, not exactly. You may meet in a 1,000 square meter, middle-aged church with 10 people and not singing. But what our understanding of a service is still very difficult, because in our hall fitting normally 450 people, we are now allowed to do 30 people, and with face masks and no singing and no cafe and no kids ministry and so on. So what are your suggestions or scenarios of thinking, what could be, would you say the normal will be like a switch turned off or on again? Or what could be strategies for the in-between? And, right now it looks like the in-between will be the next phase for a while, being allowed to do a little, but not everything, and how to handle that.
Yeah, and that's a challenge because it's country by country as well. I mean, Denmark has a similar thing, but it's a 4 square meter rule. I think yours is 10.
Well, in my part of Germany, it's in every part of Germany, there's different rules. In some parts, it's 50 people in the building. In some parts, it's the square meter thing. In some parts, it seems to be without those restrictions, but keeping the distance to everybody of 1.5 meters. So every part of Germany has different rules right now.
Yeah, and that is the challenge. And it's also the timing. They're not giving us any real timing that says, by then you will. So that makes it hard. And what I've sort of worked with the guys is I prefer almost a bigger bang entry point. So that would be more when they say you can do under 100 maybe, with some social distancing rules, but not too tight. And you can sing and you could do a service okay. And I'd say that would be that big entry back. But because of these rules, some have to slide back in. and slowly. So in your context, maybe in your building you can get 30, so you can do something with 30. But then what I'd say to that is, who are those people and what are we doing, rather than first 30 who check in on Facebook can be at church. So you might say, let's do, I've classed this time as a training moment. I think this is our wonderful, best ever moment for training. Never have we had this opportunity. As I travel, one of the biggest things I get asked from particularly department leaders is, or team leaders is, I just don't get the time to train my team. And that's because we were really busy in those olden days to get a team. And a team meeting would often involve 4 hours because they'd have to go to a place and all the rest. What we've learned now is we can do a 10-minute, 15-minute thing on Zoom, have all our team there, but people are not doing it. And then they're asking me, well, what do I say in this training? And you say everything you wanted to say at any time during the past 5 years, you never got the chance to say. This is your time to do it. So I'd say the Sundays of moving into the next stage would be more, of the biggest stage, would be more training moments rather than service moments. So you could pull some of the teams in, do cross-pollination of teams, where you have one Sunday with this group of teams, and then you have that too, and you do your service and mix it up a bit that way and do training that leads into the next phase. We're not going to get a training moment like this ever again. So let's work it from the ground up, what I mean, right up to the pastor's level. You take the team leader, say a small group leader. That person should be doing lots of face-to-face coaching, just on Zoom every week, one person, 10 minutes. They never could do that before. Now they can, because people can be at home to do it. They can pick different times to do it, and you can do it. Now we'll jump to the next level, a team leader who's running a team of, say, 10 people. This is the time to maybe do more of the 15-minute training moments where you as a team leader speaking to your team. Let's move to the department leader. I'd formalize it a bit more then and say the department leader is going to train all of the teams plus the people he leads or she leads. So you've got a double shift there. Then there's the pastor. That's you, namely you and others listening, is what do I want to say to these teams I can now say that I could never say before because we hardly could get together. There's a church I work with in Norway that has a huge conference in September. It's quite big. Hundreds come from all over. And the discussion with him was, we're not sure we can do that yet at that size because it's so big. And he said, so we're going to postpone it. And I said, why would you postpone it? He said, well, we can't do it. And I said, no, but you can. Here's what you got to think is, if you can't, because everybody comes from all around and it's very large, seal off the size that the government says you can and do a training time, because your church have got it all in their calendar. They've put that week inside. It happens every year. That's in the date. Why would you throw the date away when you've got the date secured in most people's mind? Now, it's going to be a different format and a different context, but you don't throw those times away. You use them in another way. And one of the ways I'd encourage you guys listening is to do lots more training. And this is the time to really content train, actually.
Wow. Wow. It's interesting. And it's always good to have these different perspectives on the current situation. It's also interesting for me to watch it with a fivefold ministry lens, because it seems that evangelists now say we have to reach the whole world, and the prophet says we have to pray like never before, and the teacher says I do a 30-minute teaching every day. And so it's funny how
that's true. Very good. Good observation.
On the situation lead to different results in how to handle it.
You never mentioned the pastor one. The pastor one didn't come in there at all.
Yeah, well, obviously he also said, okay, I have to call all my people every day because I can't see them on Sunday physically.
I'll tell you a funny story if we have a bit of time. I was working with a church I work with in right up in Norway, and they have a very older population in the church, and over 80. It's quite a traditional church. It's been around a long time, and which a lot of churches in Germany have too. And the pastor there said, well, this has been the opportunity and they have a lot of fights with that age group. They want to go back, and it's a change church, and they want to go back to the hymns and the stuff, and they're making change. They're always having arguments in the meetings with these old people. So he said, we took this time to ring every single one of them over 80, and they've so loved it. It's like they're bought into us again, which we never did before. We actually just dealt with them in the foyer of the church. But now, and anyway, so about a week later, I was working with a church in Sweden that's in the same boat. It's a young guy about 50, and he's doing a transition with quite a large church there, and we were having a chat. And I said, I've got an idea for you. Why don't you ring up all the people over 80? And, you know, as a new guy in making change, this is a great connection. And the line went a bit silent. I said, don't you think it'll only take you a week or so? And he said, I have 237 people in my church over 80. And I said, oh, forget it. Don't bother with that then. I mean, quite surreal setting. I thought that was a funny story, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know that many people over 80 were in one church, but there you go.
Yeah. Wow, so good. Thank you so much. I think time flies. We have to come to an end, but what would be your last word of encouragement to a leader watching right now?
Well, I don't believe, my word of encouragement will be, I don't believe God did this thing, but and I don't even believe he's using this thing. I believe people are leaning into this thing and God is meeting them. That might sound a little ominous, but it actually is. There's almost a lean-in from society that we have not seen for so long, and God is present in that time, in that moment. And that's what I like about this time, that people are leaning into us, as we talked about, by the truckload, and God is meeting them very specifically. I like that, and I think that's, to me, that's what it's all about. That's what we crave as pastors, the lean-in from people. It's easy to say God's using this or God's blessing us. That's a nice thing, and it's true. But it's an amazing thing when people lean into us and God is there. And so watch for the lean-ins. They're there. People are leaning in, and it's quite exciting times.
Yes, that's true. Thank you so much, Scott. And I'm looking forward to have you in Germany in person again, hopefully soon.
We have so much fun, Tim. I miss our disco dancing. It's just, we just never go out anymore.
Yeah. We will find ways again. Scott, God bless you, man. So good.
You too.